a zero trust approach to network segmentation. Through the prolific growth of connected devices in healthcare, trusts are being guided towards network segmentation to protect against an ever-increasing threat landscape. I am Samuel. I'm today going to be your host and session moderator. I'll be keeping this event as interactive as possible through a series of live polling and live Q&A, and this session will be being recorded. Please scan the QR code that you see on screen with your mobile device's camera. Click on the link and it will give you access to our interactive Slido platform. You can ask questions at any time by flipping to the Q&A tab. You can choose to submit those questions anonymously or use your real name. And when I activate the live polls, your mobile device will automatically switch to them, enabling you to vote and rank any options that we're seeking feedback on. These interactions are really important to this webinar as they will enable us to steer this conversation into the areas that are of most interest to you and resonate with you most highly. Joining me today are a panel of experts. We have Luke Percy, Account Director at ITGL, who specialises in healthcare. We've got Hannah Mills, a security specialist at Cisco. We've also got Steve Brigden, the UK lead for Cylera, who are a pioneering healthcare cybersecurity company. And last but not least, we've got Andy LeGrice. Andy leads the security practice here at ITGL. In terms of our agenda, I've done the introductions. We're going to be discussing the security challenges and threats in today's UK healthcare. We're going to look at ways in which you can overcome challenges around segmentation. And then we're going to spotlight on some key platforms and key services. And then we're going to interact with you again in order for you to help us suggest where we go with this, the next in this series of webinars. With that, I'm going to hand over to Luke Percy.
Thanks, Samuel. Appreciate that. Yeah, and those unfamiliar with the Slido technology, I kind of liken it to the Quest series of books, if you're familiar with those from childhood. If you like, we're the main characters, and you get the opportunity at various stages throughout the story to choose which direction we go in, and you get the chance to really test our SMEs who are here today. Samuel, if you go on to the next slide, please. So just to set the scene around the kind of challenges facing the healthcare sector at the moment, we appreciate that the sector itself has this reliance on connectivity being available and on continuously. And those connections are absolutely critical to patient outcomes, whether or not they're devices that are maintaining patient health, reporting on their care, looking at MRI machines or various imaging. And it's not just in an acute setting, it's across community and mental health as well. We also have this kind of series of users across the broad landscape. So whether or not they are clinicians or visitors, all the types of devices that connect to the network, they're expected to work seamlessly, and all of them pose various different challenges. This in itself brings a broadening of the cyber threat landscape, but it brought it home to me last week when there was an article on BBC that was specifically related to cyber warfare, and at present they've released some new guidelines around what that could mean for those who are doing patriotic hacking. So these are organisations that are potentially state funding or entirely independent, and these guidelines have been released to try and protect critical infrastructure, and that to me really brought it home as a kind of user of these services, the breadth of the threats that are going to be hitting our sector over the coming months and years. And with that, I think we're probably set up with the first of our Slido questions, Samuel.
Thanks, Luke. I'll just let this load. So as this loads, your mobile phone will flip to this particular live poll. Oh, apologies. So on your mobile device, what we're asking you to do is to select those 4 security challenges and slide them up into the box above in the order of priority for you. We'll give it a short amount of time, and then our panel will discuss the results that we're seeing. Once you've ranked those, there is a sort of submit or send button. Don't forget to press that. So I think we'll give these things maybe 30 to 45 seconds. We don't want to spend too much time, and obviously we can talk over the top as the results are still coming in. So who wants to comment on the live results that we're seeing here?
More than happy to kick off the conversation around this. So thank you, Samuel, and thank you to everyone who's participated. To be honest, it's no great surprise that we see asset visibility ranked as the most significant challenge that organisations are facing. We all know that with our vast networks and our open buildings and the services that we're all trying to provide, that getting a grip on what we have connected in the organisation, what's connected to our networks, and what those assets are doing is a real tough challenge. The number of devices connected are growing very, very significantly, and where there's most growth are around the IoT type devices that don't have users connected directly connected to those devices. So asset visibility is a biggie, and luckily we have the tools to provide that visibility, that insight. So Hannah, what is Cisco doing to assist in this area?
Yeah, thanks, Andy. And this is really interesting, because you could almost say asset visibility, risk and threat identification, they're very close. And absolutely these two things go hand in hand. So you can't identify your risks and your threat without knowing what's on your infrastructure, and what is it then that you do about it. So it's almost a bit of a journey. Certainly from a Cisco perspective, we know a lot of our healthcare customers have invested in technologies to help with asset visibility. Identity Services Engine is absolutely one of those technologies that helps with that asset visibility, because you have the ability to import your known devices into the tool, and you can also run it in monitor mode, so it can go off and detect anything else that is connected to the network. And that absolutely plays into how we can address that as asset visibility piece with an underpinning technology. However, there is a lot more to it, because there are going to be medical devices on the network that potentially ISE are not going to be able to identify. I mean, we were looking at some stats recently, and I think they were saying that a ubiquitous IV pump makes up 38% of a typical hospital's network infrastructure. That is huge. And that's obviously where Cisco, working with Cylera from a IoT perspective, absolutely comes into its own. So I'm going to hand across to Steve and just give you, Steve, a moment to talk about the Cylera piece as well.
Yeah, thanks, Hannah. Thanks, Andy. So I'm actually glad as well that asset visibility came up first, because, to my mind, it's absolutely foundational. IT as the team within a trust who've got responsibility for looking after IT assets, but also cybersecurity, they've got a pretty decent handle. Tools like ICE and a lot of other tools there's a pretty decent handle on the number of connected devices, the users, the profiles of those users, etc. But actually, when it comes to medical devices and other connected IoT devices, actually they're pretty blind. And the sort of visibility of these devices is sort of foundational to everything else. To put that into context, so we're deployed in, I'm going to say 25 NHS trusts today across England and health boards in Scotland. So quite widely deployed. And what we see, I would say that most trusts, most acutes, right, to be clear, have probably got between 10,000, probably an average of 10,000 connected IoT medical devices in them. So it's actually quite a significant blind spot. And some are smaller because they're still starting on the journey and just beginning to connect those devices onto, but actually it's clearly increasing. So it's actually quite a significant risk, I guess, that's being injected into the system. Obviously, they're being connected for brilliant reasons because they deliver enhanced patient care, better patient outcomes, so that's fantastic. But they do come with the unintended consequence of opening up the attack surface. Right, so for me, this is foundational. Understanding this is really good. I know Luke thought it would be really interesting to show a quick slide of what our dashboard looks like, so you can get a sense of the level of detail that you can see. So I don't know, Sam, if you can just pop up our dashboard slide.
Sorry, Steve, I went too far there.
That's the one.
There you go.
That's the one. Thank you.
No
That's
problem.
the one. So, it's not a demo, not to go into this in great detail, but, the key thing around discovering medical and IoT devices is you can't load agents onto a medical device. You can't run AV on them. You can't vulnerability scan them. There are lots of reasons around that, but you just simply can't. So actually the way you have to identify them is by passively scanning the network, listening to all the network traffic, and then interpreting what you see into this inventory. Key point is it's enormously complex in the level of detail it discovers. So we won't just discover an IP address, MAC address. We'll say that's a GE Voluson E10 ultrasound with version 331 firmware. It's got embedded Windows 7 operating system. It was first seen here, last seen here. A whole load of detail that allows us to build up the picture that you see before you. So, you see the inventory broken down by device type. You can break it down by manufacturer type. You can see the risk associated with it, how many affected devices for each risk. And threats to us are sort of in-flight exploits or potential in-flight exploits, so you can see those. So a whole level of really granular detail that allows you then to start building out your risk posture and all the other things that we'll probably talk about in a moment. Sandy, I'll hand back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. So I guess that's covered a fair amount of the second most significant concern around the risk and the threat identification. So understanding what's on the network, what's connected is one thing, getting that asset visibility, and then the next layer is understanding what it's doing, what's it connecting to. Is it connecting to services that it perhaps shouldn't be, that we're not expecting it to connect to? And we know that Cylera offers that insight as to what those devices are doing for the threat identification, which then allows us to work on our policies for segmentation, which is great. We see that compliance, that double-edged sword, the carrot and the stick, is ranked third. So, Hannah, from a compliance perspective, we work very closely with Cisco. We work with ISE to help support compliance. I know you're having a lot of conversations with a lot of customers along similar lines.
Yeah, and everyone that I speak to has a slightly different perspective about compliance. We have customers who are looking at DSTP. We have customers that are looking at CAF. We're looking. I was actually speaking to a customer the other day who was talking about Cyber Essentials Plus, and actually the key themes within all of those compliance technologies are really the who. So who is connecting? What are they connecting on? So the what, the when, so having a clear audit trail of who's connecting into your infrastructure, How are they connecting? What's the device that they're using? Are they using a wired or wireless device? And actually, having all of that information absolutely plays into that compliance piece very, very clearly, because within, whether you're looking at DSTP, a CAF, a Cyber Essentials, it could be an ISO 27001, whatever it may be, or a best of breed, there are technical controls within each of those. And most of them are related to segmentation. And how do you drive that policy? Well, you can only drive policy once you have visibility, and once you understand the who, the what, the why, the when, the how, that drives policy, which then drives the compliance piece. So it really is a bit of a journey. But ISE underpins all of that to give you that visibility.
Yeah, excellent. And Steve, Cylera are absolutely key around certain assertions in the DSPT.
Yeah, and I think it's fantastic, right? I mean, for me, the key thing here is that the NHS, through digital or England and improvement, now properly understand that the risks associated with medical and IoT devices. So that's fantastic, and these were all represented in DSPT, sort of, I guess, 18 months or so ago for the first time, with assertions 938 and 939, which specifically talk about medical devices, connected medical devices. So fantastic. And sort of when I look at this, you know, whilst those two assertions specifically say connected medical devices, the reality is a lot of the other assertions, you know, which were previously just talking about IT devices or practices and what have you, now you can start inserting medical devices into those same assertions as well. So when we look at it, we look at, actually we cover or help with 44 of the assertions. 100% answer 938 and 939, which are the ones that specifically call out. But the data that we surface allows you to more fully and more completely answer the rest of those. So you're ending up with a far more rounded response to DSPT. And of course, you know, digital, I keep calling them digital, obviously England, issue cyber alerts or care certs as well regularly. So the other thing we do is really simplify the way you can respond to that. You'll get a cyber alert care cert come out, and we can tell you instantly whether you've got any devices that you need to worry about with that. So our own sort of cyber alerts dashboard highlights that perfectly. So not only sort of helping you maintain your compliance and submit your assertions for review, but actually helping you respond to things such as cyber alerts.
And there it is.
Oh, there we go. It's almost as if we planned that.
Almost.
I'd say that's just the cyber alerts dashboard. It is, you know, nothing to particularly call out other than, you know, the picture there shows you which devices relate to which cyber alerts, and then you can, you know, prioritize and assign them and deal with them, etc.
Excellent. And that touches on the last point of the four, doesn't it, really? The threat mitigation. So understanding where those vulnerabilities and the risks are, whether those threats are through tools like this, allows us collectively to mitigate those threats, which is also achieved through effective segmentation, which is what this is all about.
Yeah, and what I'd say on that one, Andy, is, you know, we have to understand that if it's an MRI, you can't just run along and patch an MRI. You might know that there's a patch available. There might not be a patch available, but you can't just run along and patch it. So actually, in this situation, really the only answer is segmentation, is microsegmentation. So that's where the work we put into, and I think we'll probably talk about it later, our integration with Cisco ICE, to really push those segmentation policies down and simplify the whole sort of mitigation piece. That's a critical part of it. Up till then, we help you understand what you've got and what the problems are, but this is where the rubber hits the road. This is how you deal with that.
Yeah.
Excellent. Should we do another ranking poll?
Okay.
So, overcoming segmentation challenges. If you would, could you rank these in priority order? Fear of impacting patient care due to inaccurate policies. You've not deemed segmentation a priority. Your network doesn't support this, or you don't have sufficient resources or skills internally in order to segment. Don't forget, there is Q&A functionality as well within the Slido platform. You can also upvote the questions asked of others. We will be stopping for 2 Q&A breaks. In the event that we get lots of questions, that upvoting's really critical because it will allow us to focus on the questions that resonate most with our audience. Again, we'll give this about 30 seconds and I'll hand back to our panel of experts to talk through the results. It's close again between the first and second ranks here, Hannah.
Yeah, it is, and I think they're related. So it's interesting that the answer, or the most popular answer in the last poll was around asset visibility, and the fear of impacting patient care due to inaccurate policies has come out on top here. I think they're related, because if you don't know what you've got on your network, you can't be confident in putting forward a policy that you know is going to be both secure, effective, but allow the business to continue to function. And this is exactly what we see with the organisations that we work with. Quite often, key fundamental elements of the technology are there to allow effective segmentation, but there's real concern around deploying both segmentation and zero trust technologies, because there's a big unknown that visibility is not there around what's connecting to the network and what it's doing, and therefore there's a significant risk in developing and applying policy without that confidence. And Hannah, what are your thoughts around this?
Yeah, wholeheartedly agree. I probably fair to say absolutely no surprise that has come out on top. It's something that I hear regularly. I think when it comes to utilising technology such as Identity Services Engine, when we talk about, and going back to the earlier conversation about visibility, so the who, the what, the why, the when, the how, the where people are connecting, actually ISE has a capability where you can deploy in monitor mode, so you can see what is going on in your infrastructure. You can see all of those elements, the who, the what, the why, the when, the how, to allow you to, and allow our customers to make policy-based decisions, import that into the technology and run it in monitor mode to see how it will react prior to going live. And I think that's really fundamental, because you can make those changes without impacting live environments and day-to-day operations. And that is absolutely something we always recommend to our customers to do as a best practice. That's exactly what the monitor mode is there for. It's test your policy, see how it works. Does it break anything? Because no one needs the help desk being contacted or worse, patients being impacted before you actually deploy and go live.
Excellent. And Steve, Cylera goes a step further with a focus on medical IoT devices by looking at what they are communicating with. So there may be services in use that are unknown, but are absolutely valid, and therefore must be considered in the development of that policy.
Yeah, completely agree. So knowledge is king here, right? I mean, and Hannah's just talked about the sort of where Identity Services Engine helps identify who, what, why, when, how, etc. So I think we effectively supplement that by providing that same level of detail for all of the connected medical and IoT devices. Let's say whether that's an MRI machine or an infusion pump or a surveillance camera, doesn't matter. So we end up sort of doing behavioural analysis on all of those, understand what good network behaviour looks like. And when we translate that to segmentation policies, but in the same way as Hannah was talking, we can run those in monitor mode or pass them down to Hannah's identity services engine for enforcement. We create those policies based on the trust's actual device on their actual network participating in their actual workflow, so that the segmentation policy we create is highly accurate specifically for that environment. So that in itself is a way of simplifying, because actually we write the policy and we pass the policy to Cisco ICE for them to enforce or do some more monitoring. So it sort of points to the question about skills as well, because actually we do that for you, but actually it also de-risks that mitigation step, because we've built that based around real actual behavior. So, and we form allow type policies. So we're not going to block off stuff. If it's communicating, we enforce an allow policy. So we never disrupt the operation of, imaging systems or whatever it happens to be.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, and touching on the second point around sufficient skills and resources. Again, this is a very common challenge. We know that there's a lot of competition for people with cybersecurity skills. We know that there's more and more complexity in delivering healthcare from a technical perspective. We know that teams are stretched and they're being pulled in different directions. And at ITGL, we work either to deliver projects in their entirety around zero trust and segmentation and improving the security posture of an organisation in that area, or we can work effectively in a consultative capacity to advise and recommend in order to bolster the existing capability. And we can go on to pretty much provide a managed service around ISE and Cylera if so required. So we can take a lot of that effort away from the organisation that needs that service. But it's something that we see all the time. The stretched resources within NHS trusts, and we work in an adaptive way to support those teams. And the third point down is tricky. It's a little bit of a tough nut to crack. I'm glad to see it's not up at the top. I suspect that only a few years ago it would have been ranked higher up than it has been today. But the calling out the risk of not being able to function is obviously much potentially more of a risk than the not investing the time and resources to achieve segmentation. And I guess the final point around network infrastructure not supporting this, again, I'm personally not surprised to see that down at the bottom, because pretty much every network can support network segmentation in some form, even if we're looking at VLANs and access control lists. So being able to deploy segmentation is almost a given, but it's how we get there and how effective and how efficient we do it is the big challenge, the big question. And I guess that comes back to the inputs around the visibility and the identifying the threats and the communications between those connected devices.
Thanks, Andy. I think to just keep things on track, we're gonna move to a quick Q&A break. We do have some questions in. Just give me a few seconds to get those loaded up. The most popular through upvoting is this question here: how are NHS organisations implementing network segmentation in line with the NHS digital network segmentation guidance issued to CIOs in April last year. Who wants to take that one?
Andy, do you want to take that?
Okay, so how are NHS also implementing network segmentation in line with NHS digital networks? Okay, so we see a variety of approaches to achieving segmentation. Most are taking a very slow, cautious approach to segmentation, probably for the reasons that have been discussed. There are those challenges in identifying what's on the network, how to develop the policy, etc. So there is slow progress being made, but we are all aware of the need to ramp that up and improve that approach to segmentation.
Thanks, Andy. Next up is, can you explain the differences between risk and threat? Good question. Who wants to tackle that one? Steve?
Sure, I can do that. So, yeah, for us, risk and threat mean two different things, right? Risk, and I can see how they're often sort of aligned, but for us, the way we define it is a risk is anything that's a risk. That sounds stupid, right? But whether it's a CVE or an open telnet, a device that has a vulnerability, manufacturer declared vulnerability like a CVE, or whether it's an open telnet port or it's end-of-life software, end-of-life firmware, all of those things represent a risk. Now, the level of risk depends, I guess, where they are, what they're involved in, what type of clinical workflows they're engaged in, where they are in the hospital, how often they're used. All of those things sort of fold into that level of risk, right? And as an organization, you can choose whether you accept that level of risk or you want to worry about that level of risk, right? So risk for us is effectively all of the potential vulnerabilities fall into the risk bucket, and then you prioritize and you risk score and you act accordingly, right? And you can mitigate against and protect against all of those risks, and you pick the top ones first. A risk of an open telnet port in A&E on a device that's used 24 hours a day every day is different to that same vulnerability on an infusion pump that spends most of its life in a cupboard in outpatients and is hardly ever used, for example. Yeah. So that's where we put risks. Threats to us are what I'm going to call an active exploit or a potential active exploit, something that's weird, right? So it may be a surveillance camera talking to your EPR system. It's a DICOM viewer connecting out to some device in Russia. These things obviously are wrong, shouldn't be happening. Whether that's aligned to a known CVE or it's just weird network behavior, these are threats, and these are the things that we would suggest you need to deal with this second, right? A risk is something you can worry about and prioritize and program in. A threat, active exploit, or active something you should be worrying about and deal with that now. So in an ideal world, you might have thousands of risks in a trust. Hopefully not, but you might well have thousands of risks in a trust, but hopefully you've got zero threats, right? That would be the sort of the hopeful, the expected outcome.
Thanks, Steve. And final question, how do these tools assist compliance with DSPT and CAF?
So there's quite a lengthy answer there. So
can we keep it short in the interest of time?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've touched on a number of these, and we've actually within ITGL we've worked through all of the assertions for and aligned the capabilities of these tools that we're discussing today from an ISE and Cylera perspective against DSPT, against the cyber assessment framework, and also against cyber essentials. So we've got a clear view as to how we can collectively support compliance with these requirements, and extend the capabilities through integration with other tools and services. So we've got that available if people are interested.
Thanks, Andy.
I'll probably add to that, Andy, and say that the technology only plays a very specific part in achieving compliance as well. It has to go hand in hand with people, process, policy, training, all of those requirements. So whilst IT is the underpinning building block, you have to have a cohesive approach right across the board.
Absolutely.
Great, thank you. Please do keep the questions coming. We do have another quick Q&A break at the end. In the event that we time out, we will ensure we answer all the questions and distribute those answers to you, the audience, along with the recording. Right, moving us along, I think we've now got some high-level overviews on Cisco's ISE product from Hannah and Steve's Cylera offerings. Apologies, my deck is all over the place. So first of all, Hannah, over to you.
Perfect, thank you, Sam. So I just wanted to take a few minutes because I know that a lot of our customers have invested in ISE already, but what we're also finding is they're only using it for a very specific use case. So predominantly a lot of the conversations that I'm having is that it's being used for things like 802.1x or AAA authentication, but there is so much more to the solution. So really think of ISE as your automated security policy management platform. And Sam, if you just move on to the next slide. Now, I know that this is a bit of an eye chart, but there is a breadth of capability within ISE, but in a very simplistic form. Really think of this as your all-in-one policy control from a centralized platform across the entirety of your enterprise network. It's there to simplify delivery of a consistent policy across your wired and your wireless network, as well as all of your remote VPN connections. It has all of the sensor and profiling capabilities within it. So again, going back to the who, the what, the why, the when, the how, it gives you all of that telemetry detail in order to allow you to make policy-based decisions. Because it has that level of automation, that obviously saves the teams a lot of time in terms of pushing out those policies. And it also provides those foundational building blocks. And I know a lot of people don't like the term zero trust. Some people like zero trust, some people like least privilege access, but it also forms part of that journey as well. So given the fact that compliance guidance, which we've seen is coming down from NHSE regarding segmentation and zero trust, think of ISE as that core foundational building block that has that multifaceted capability to provide segmentation and so much more. And I could probably spend hours talking about this, but I think that probably gives a very high level overview as to some of the capabilities within ISE. So Sam, I'm going to hand back to you.
Thanks, Hannah. And Steve, what can your Cylera offering do around segmentation and zero trust?
Thanks. And so, yeah, thanks, Luke. So hopefully my slide will pop up in a second, but, you know, hopefully we've sort of covered during the conversation what we do, but essentially we do these three things, right? The foundation, as I mentioned earlier, is that high definition, high fidelity inventory of all of the connected medical devices. I say medical devices, medical and IoT. So let's say MRIs, infusion pumps, smart door systems, surveillance cameras, all of these things contribute to the healthcare sort of setting. So sort of a passive agentless discovery in the first place, high level of detail as I talked about. Baselining network behavior for all of these devices so that we can begin to understand communication patterns and abnormal behavior, that sort of thing. And building around that, then once we've got a huge level of detail around all of the devices that are connected, what they look like, what they're doing, etc., then we can start doing that risk profiling and looking at how we mitigate against any threats. As I say, risks are things we can worry about, threats are things we really need to worry about. So real-time detection of a surveillance camera talking to your EPR, things like that. But as Hannah was just talking about with Zero Trust, really we're bringing sort of all of those connected devices, the non-people side of things, we're bringing those connected devices into the Zero Trust architecture. We're giving you the identification, the understanding of what they're doing, etc., so that you can start to build sort of access control policies that Cisco Identity Services Engine can then start enforcing. One of the other things, by the way, so if that's the inventory and the risk and threat through to segmentation to drive sort of the shrinking of the attack surface back down, the last piece that we bring is operational insights. We discover a lot of information about these devices. Some of this is directly security related, right? It's got an open telnet port. It's using default username passwords, very security centric, but actually a lot of operational efficiency type data. So a whole load of analytics around utilization, first seen, last seen, how many hours in the day it's used, things like that. This gives clinical engineering, EVME, medical engineering, whatever you want to call it, a real rich set of data that helps them begin to optimize the utilization of these devices. And then finally, with all of this, we recognize we work within an ecosystem within healthcare. So we'll export all of this, not only to the SIM for sort of event management and that sort of stuff, but actually into CMMSs or in fact any other system that forms part of the healthcare environment, so that they can benefit from the level of detail that we've got that isn't really present anywhere else in the organization, but also sort of that analytics data that really isn't present. So to start making some great decisions and improve patient outcomes.
Thanks, Steve. Next, oh, sorry, Andy, I thought we were going to you to give an ITGL services overview. 1 second. My slides are in the wrong order. Apologies for that.
That's okay. No problem, Samuel. So yeah, I just wanted to spend a couple of minutes talking about how we at ITGL really help resource-constrained organisations improve their cybersecurity posture. Very much focused on all things segmentation and zero trust, but we, as discussed, we help organisations achieve compliance effectively. So we shorten the time and the workload required to demonstrate compliance with DSPT, with more and more so with the cyber assessment framework and cyber essentials. But as discussed, segmentation is a real hot topic. It's a tough nut to crack, and we help organisations achieve that by sharing our experience, by ensuring that we can quickly and effectively identify those assets, help develop policy, and then help configure the network infrastructures to ensure effective segmentation and to ensure that the visibility and control is maintained. So we are de-risking the move to effective segmentation. We've talked a fair bit about zero trust. What we've really focused on today is zero trust associated with the network. So verifying the device as it attempts to connect to the network, ensuring that the user has appropriate privileges to access the services that they're looking to access. But we also work beyond the network from a zero trust perspective. So we look at how we can effectively provide secure connectivity to cloud apps from remote workers whose traffic may never even touch the network. So we have broad offerings and services around zero trust. And closely related to that is the work that we do around helping organisations migrate to a security service edge architecture, or possibly a SASE architecture. There's a subtle difference between the two, probably a conversation for another time. But we're looking to ensure that we are, again, effectively and efficiently delivering those cybersecurity services that have traditionally been delivered through on-premises services into the cloud. So no matter where the user or the service is, that security service edge will sit between the user and the service or application that they're connecting to. So helping organizations migrate effectively from a cost and a time perspective to those architectures is becoming more and more popular. We're seeing more and more demand for that. In order to do that effectively, we need to ensure that we understand where any gaps are from a security perspective. So we consult with organisations around their existing security architecture. We analyse what's there, how effectively it's being used, and we ensure that any services that haven't been enabled, where they're appropriate to do so, are enabled. We're looking for efficiencies because we know that everybody's time constrained, resource constrained. So enabling services that have already been paid for a lot of the time, integrating them with other services from other vendors to ensure those efficiencies are achieved. We offer pen testing, vulnerability assessments from a simple vulnerability scan, so right down from an unauthenticated vulnerability scan, right up to a full on-premises pen test. So we can assist in that area. Hannah touched on the fact that effective security is not just about technical controls. I appreciate that most of us on the webinar have a real focus and interest in the technical controls, but ensuring that the users are aware of the risks, of the threats that they're likely to encounter on an almost daily basis is important. So we offer a fully managed awareness training service. If your organisation feels like existing arrangements could do with bolstering, then we can help there. And then finally, vulnerability risk management, a bit of a mouthful, but we've touched on the fact that we can identify risk, we can identify vulnerabilities, but we've not necessarily talked about how we can effectively patch those vulnerabilities in the right order. So we work with Cisco and Cylera to identify not only the vulnerability, but also the highest risk that those vulnerable devices present to the organisation, and therefore prioritise the workloads that are required in order to mitigate those risks.
Thanks, Andy.
Thank you, Samuel.
I am now going to wind back to our Q&A. Bear with me while I... Okay. 3 questions in. NHS organisations use Microsoft Defender for endpoint. This finds IoT devices, shows vulnerability recommendations, CVEs, etc. What's better or different with Cylera, Steve?
Great question. So I'd say it comes down to the simple thing of level of accuracy and detail in our initial discovery. Right, we discover devices to a significantly higher level of detail than Defender, or indeed our peers in the market. If I'm honest, that's a core strength of ours, is that level of detail in the initial discovery. So the accuracy of that discovery, the accuracy of the sort of what we call attributes that we associate with these devices, leads us to a much higher fidelity risk score. So far fewer false positives, that sort of thing. So which then follows on to allowing us to build more accurate segmentation policies, where, by the way, Defender simply doesn't play, right? So they'll be looking at a list of an inventory, which perhaps helps you with DSPT, of course. There'll be overlaying risks and vulnerabilities, but mitigation part is left off when it comes to segmentation, but our inventory is higher fidelity, our risk and posture is higher fidelity, and therefore the segmentation piece works. And just as a sort of a throwaway piece, we actually did a press release with a customer just literally last week before, with Dartford and Gravesham NHS Trust, and in that press release, Gary there, the head of ICT, said that when they went to market and tested a number of different platforms, we were 15% or more accurate in the level of detail of devices we discover. And so if you think about that, even if it is just 15%, that's 15% devices that you didn't know about that we know about. So that's probably the level of accuracy is the best thing.
Thank you, Steve. Next up.
And by the way, if we want to follow on with that, we can do a demo and you can see that, right? We can show you that.
Yeah, we'll be sharing with our audience everyone's contact details at the end, along with the recording, so you can get in direct touch with any of us. Next question, how can Cisco assist the NHS with a high cost of licensing within ISE? One for you, Hannah?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, this is a very common conversation that we have. So we are acutely aware that there is significant investment that our NHS customers have already made in ISE. And there are features and capabilities that you might want to explore in a upper tier of license, and that comes with it an associated cost. We regularly sit down and have a very open conversation about right sizing. What are the outcomes you want to achieve to ensure that whatever licenses you require, you are not over ordering, purchasing, consuming. So we do go through a very, very strenuous qualification process with you in terms of what you want to achieve. We do that with our partners, such as the guys that are on the call today. We also do that independently. So what I would say is that if you do want to reach out and have that one-to-one conversation, please do so. It is something we are doing a lot of at the moment, especially with some of that advanced capability. And this is not an all or nothing. You don't have to upgrade all of your licenses. It is about right sizing it according to your outcomes so that you get the best out of your investments.
Thank you.
No problem.
And lastly, one for you, Steve, again, how does Cylera work with large distributed networks such as community services as opposed to large single campus seen in the acute sector?
Yeah, another great question. So this comes down to an architectural question or an architectural conversation. For us to do what we do, we need to see all the network traffic, right? So how your network traffic is routed is the sort of the first question we have to understand. In an ideal world, all of the community primary care sort of traffic would route back to a central database, a central data center rather. If it does, we can see all of that there and actually we'll capture everything. If it doesn't, then we've got a few sort of deployment methods. One is sort of, typically we deploy a sensor into the core of the acute, but actually we've got then sort of what we call a micro sensor, so a small footprint sensor that could go out into a community center, or indeed a virtual sensor that could sit on a virtual machine, or in fact a Cisco router as part of it, as in a container on a Cisco router. So we've got a number of deployment methods if we want to deploy remotely. I'd say customers that have covered community care at the minute have deployed multiple small sensors. But as I say, that it's an architectural conversation. We can do it. We need to think about network traffic flows and where best to capture it.
Thanks, Steve. Okay, let's move on. Apologies for going through these slides. Right, next up, just very, very quickly, we obviously care about what our audience, our clients, our prospects want us to cover in these webinars. I've just activated a very quick multi-choice poll within Slido. If you would, be so kind as to vote on that one. You can select as many options as you like, and we will, once you press send, the results will split that out into a nice pie chart, just so that we know we're hitting the right tones for the next in this series of webinars. So it's equal split at the moment between network ops management, application visibility, and security service edge. Excellent. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Luke. I'll leave that poll open just in the interest of time. I'm going to move on to Luke, who's got a bit of a call to action.
Thanks, Samuel, and thanks to all our experts, Steve, Hannah, and Andy today. It's been really, really useful. I hope that the audience has done so, felt the same. I guess back to my analogy around the Quest series of books here is what do you want to happen next? And a number of the questions that we received and kind of directions that you drove the conversation today really highlighted to me that the guidance that was delivered by NHSD last year to the CIOs is absolutely top of mind. There's definitely an element of concern around patient care and impact of taking clinical devices offline. So working with experts like ITGL and the team around us, please speak to us. This is what we're here to do, to support you and engage with you on those building those relevant policies. So come to us to understand what licenses you might already have from an ISC perspective. We can explore your smart accounts and align whatever licenses are there, and also support you in alignment with some of the compliance, so that we can help you build business cases for any further investment to get to those granular levels of detail that we can get with Cylera, and then really start to build those policies and enforce them. So we've got our contact details there on the page. We will share the individual contact details from Steve, Hannah, Andy, and myself as well, following on from the webinar close. Appreciate it's Cybersecurity Awareness Month, so webinars are in hot demand. But so really appreciate you taking the time to join us here today.
Thanks, everyone. Look out for the recording. I'll also send the results of those live interactions out to the audience too. But that's it from us. Wish you a very pleasant Tuesday afternoon. Thanks, everyone.